Throughout NFL history, certain quarterback classes become legendary. The 1983 draft had John Elway, Dan Marino, and Jim Kelly. The 2004 draft had Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, and Phillip Rivers. Recently, there hasn't been a draft with the same elite status, although for a minute there it looked like the 2012 draft could be. Well, now there is a group of quarterbacks who were on track to be in the Hall once their careers are done. The 2020 class. With a few years in the books now, we can begin sizing up the 2020 class because it may end up being unforgettable. After a 2-14 season, Cincinnati took LSU's Joe Burrow first overall after he led one of the best offenses in college football history and won the Heisman. In the NFL, he set the record for completions in a game by a rookie and was off to a very promising start until disaster struck. In week 11 of his rookie season, Joe Burrow tore his left ACL and MCL. Burrow ended up making a full recovery and started week 1 of 2021. Burrow really started making his mark later in the season with a 34-31 win over the Chiefs to claim the AFC North, throwing for more than 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Burrow led the Bengals to their first playoff win in 31 years. Then the Bengals knocked off the 1-seed Titans the next week, setting up a rematch with the Chiefs. Despite trailing 21-3, Burrow led the Bengals back and won in overtime. Then in the Super Bowl, Burrow threw for 263 yards and a touchdown, but he couldn't finish off the 2-minute drill for the ring. Still, Burrow finished the year with more than 4,600 yards and 34 touchdowns. Yet there were still doubters headed into his third season. Was the playoff run a fluke? Well, those questions seemed very legit after a pretty rough start to 2022 when Burrow committed 5 turnovers in week 1 and then turned around and lost to the Cooper Rush-led Cowboys. The Bengals were mid heading into their bye, but after, they won 9 straight before making another AFC title game at Kansas City. Now, Burrow didn't have his best game. He threw for 240 yards, a touchdown, and had 2 picks, but still had a couple chances to win late. Burrow's year ended with 4,400 yards and 35 touchdowns. Now, Burrow says the Bengals Super Bowl window is open his entire career, and he might be right. Now, Joe Burrow was considered the top quarterback in the 2020 draft, and rightfully did go first, but there was kind of a debate between the next 2 guys, Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert. The Dolphins drafted Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa with the 5th pick in the draft after they went 5-11. Tua burst onto the scene in college after subbing in for Jalen Hurts in the second half of the national championship against Georgia, and ultimately they won in overtime. As a sophomore, he faced Joe Burrow in a shootout, throwing for 418 yards and 4 touchdowns and a pretty crazy 46-41 loss. He was electric at the college level, but his time at Alabama ended with a dislocated hip. Unfortunately, injuries have become the story of Tua's NFL career so far. He made his pro debut in week 6 of his rookie year and made his first start in week 8 after the bye. He missed his first career NFL game due to injury in week 12 after jamming his thumb and ended up finishing his rookie year with 1,800 yards and 11 touchdowns across 9 games. In week 2 of 2021, Tua ended up having several ribs cracked and was out until week 6, but then Tua turned around and led Miami on a 7-game winning streak as the team went 9-8 with Tua playing in 13 games. Tua passed for 2,600 yards and 16 touchdowns with 10 interceptions. The drama continued into his third season. The Dolphins started 3-0, including a wild 42-38 win at Baltimore, where Tua threw for more than 450 yards and 6 touchdowns. In week 3, Tua started against the Bills, but left the game due to an alleged back injury that happened after he hit his head on the ground. Then on Thursday, the Dolphins faced Cincinnati, and Tua Tua suffered a more severe head injury and had a fencing response. He missed a week before returning and played well. Unfortunately, the injury problems came back on Christmas against the Packers. Tua threw 3 picks in the fourth quarter after another head injury and ended up missing the rest of the season. Tua finished his third year with 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns, but was concussed 3 times and missed 4 games. Not ideal. Meanwhile, the Chargers did luck into a stud 6th overall. The Chargers took Oregon quarterback Justin Herbert, and it didn't take very long for him to see the field, but it wasn't how Los Angeles planned it. Herbert made his first NFL start by accident in week 2 after a painkiller shot punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung. Herbert threw for 311 yards, a touchdown, and an interception in an overtime loss. Herbert started the rest of the year, finishing the season with 4,300 yards and 31 touchdowns. That touchdown mark set the record for most touchdown passes by a rookie. Herbert was named Offensive Rookie of the Year, silencing the doubters who thought the Chargers had reached for him. In 2021, the Chargers started 4-1 with a win at Kansas City where Herbert threw 4 touchdowns. Herbert continued to put up impressive numbers throughout the year. Then, needing a win or a tie in Week 18 to make the playoffs, Herbert played well, but it wasn't enough to beat the Raiders, and it did leave a bit of a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Still, Herbert threw for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns, setting an NFL record for most yards and touchdowns in the first 2 years of an NFL career. He played all 17 games again in 2022, despite some rib injuries. The Chargers made the playoffs for the first time with Herbert at quarterback, and things were going great, with LA up 27-0 late in the first half. But the Chargers did what they did best, and they screwed things up. They lost to spoil another great season from Justin Herbert. Herbert finished the year with 4,700 yards and 25 touchdowns. Now, everybody expected Burrow, Tua, and Herbert to be the top 3 guys at the draft, but the biggest curveball was Jordan Love, who the Packers traded up to take 20th overall despite having Aaron Rodgers. Love didn't dress for a single game his rookie year and has started 1 whole game so far. Love made his first appearance in week 1 of the 2021 season, relieving Rodgers in a 38-3 blowout loss to the Saints, completing 7 passes for 68 yards with a fumble. Love ended up making his first NFL start in week 9 at Kansas City, with his parents watching way up in the stands, if you remember that. Love ended up throwing his first career touchdown to Allen Lazard, but the comeback attempt fell short in a pretty boring 13-7 game. Jordan Love's most recent meaningful action came on Sunday Night Football last season against the Eagles when he relieved an injured Aaron Rodgers and threw for 116 yards and a touchdown in a shootout loss. Now, with Rodgers gone, the Packers reworked Love's deal to avoid a pretty expensive 5th-year option. Now, he's under contract for 2 more years, though it is a little bit more of a 1-year situation heading into 2023. None of the quarterbacks from the class have won a ring, but Joe Burrow and 1 other have come close: Jalen Hurts. The Eagles took Hurts with the 53rd pick in the 2nd round after a very interesting college career. As a freshman at Alabama, Hurts lost to Clemson in the national championship. Then as a sophomore, he started in the national championship before he was benched for Tua Tagovailoa. He then came in for Tua midway through the SEC title game as a junior and played pretty well. Then in 2019, he transferred to Oklahoma, and he made the playoff again before being blown out by Joe Burrow's LSU team. His NFL career has also been pretty odd. He appeared in 15 total games as a rookie, mostly as like a gadget player out of the backfield. Now, he was finally put into play consistently after Carson Wentz was benched in week 13. Hurts ended up coming in and throwing for 109 yards, a touchdown, and had an interception. He started for the first time the next week against the Saints and had 273 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. In the last week of the regular season, though, Hurts was the center of another quarterback shuffle when he was pulled as the Eagles appeared to be throwing the game for draft seeding. Hurts became the starter for the 2021 season and led the Eagles to the playoffs, though he did turn the ball over 4 times in his first postseason game. He finished 2021 with 3,900 total yards and 26 total touchdowns. He had shown promise, but the best was yet to come. 2022 was quite the breakout year for Hurts, who led the Eagles to an 8-0 start. Against the Packers, Hurts became the first player in NFL history to throw and rush for 150 yards and throw multiple touchdowns in a game. He did miss a game due to a sprained shoulder and missed one game late in the season, but was on fire in the playoffs en route to winning the NFC. Then in the Super Bowl, Hurts played well, but a brutal fumble flipped the game after the Chiefs returned it for a touchdown and helped Patrick Mahomes earn his second ring. Still, Hurts did prove himself as a force, finishing the year with 3,700 passing yards, 760 rushing yards, and 35 touchdowns. He finished second in MVP voting, and Hurts signed the biggest contract in NFL history at 5 years, $255 million. Hurts has earned his money and appears to have a bright future ahead, just like the other 4 quarterbacks taken before him at the 2020 NFL Draft.